Clara had been working at McCall Industries for just over 6 months. Every day, she followed the same routine. She arrived early in the morning, before the office workers filled the hallways. Her uniform, a plain green jumpsuit with a pair of rubber gloves, was a sharp contrast to the suits and dresses that everyone else wore. While most of the staff came to work looking polished and busy, Clara moved quietly through the office, her footsteps barely making a sound on the polished floors. The building was huge, several floors of shiny glass and chrome. But despite the grandeur, Clara's job remained simple. She cleaned the desks, wiped down the glass windows, and made sure that the floors were spotless. She knew the building inside and out, from the high-rise windows with breathtaking views to the narrow hallways tucked away behind the elevators. The building seemed cold and impersonal, much like the people who worked inside it. To most of the employees, Clara was invisible. They hardly noticed her, except when they needed her to do something. If someone spilled a coffee, they'd call her over to clean it up. If a printer jammed, they'd ask her to fix it. Many of them didn't even bother to smile at her when they passed by. They had their own busy lives, and Clara was just a part of the background. Some of the employees would whisper when they saw her. A few even made jokes about her behind her back, thinking she couldn't hear. "Look at her. What does she know? She probably can't even read a report." One of them laughed one morning as Clara cleaned the break room. Others would say things like, "I bet she doesn't even understand what goes on in this building." Clara didn't mind, or at least she didn't show it. She had learned long ago not to let their words affect her. After all, she was there to do a job, not to be liked or recognized. She kept her head down and focused on her work, always doing it as best as she could. She believed in the value of hard work and knew that no matter how small or insignificant her role might seem to others, it was important. Every task she completed, every desk wiped down, every floor swept clean, was part of something bigger. But there were times when the whispers, the jokes, and the sideways glances got to her. Sometimes she'd sit in the small storage closet during her break, staring out of the window. She would watch the employees in their fancy suits, talking and laughing in the distance, and wonder what it would be like to be part of that world. But she pushed those thoughts away. After all, she had a job to do. Clara was a woman of few words, but she was observant. She noticed everything, from the way the executives always sat in the big conference room with their expensive coffee cups to the way the office workers spoke to her as if she didn't matter. But deep down, she knew something they didn't. Not everything was as it seemed in that high-rise building. McCall Industries had a reputation for being a place where only the sharpest minds thrived. The employees walked with a sense of pride, their suits pressed, their hair neatly styled. They worked hard, and they expected others to do the same. To them, success was measured by titles and high-paying positions. The cleaning staff, like Clara, were hardly considered part of the real workforce. As the weeks went by, Clara began to notice how the workers treated her and the other cleaning staff. Whenever a group of employees passed by, they would often snicker and make quiet comments. "I bet she's here just for the paycheck," one of them would say, glancing at Clara. Another would add, "She probably doesn't even understand what's going on in this building." Clara ignored them, but deep down it stung. She could feel their eyes on her whenever she cleaned the offices, wiped the windows, or took out the trash. She would hear them talking about her when they thought she wasn't listening. It wasn't just the occasional rude comment. There was a sense of superiority in their voices, as if they were looking down on her simply because of her job. She was just a cleaning lady, someone whose presence wasn't worth acknowledging. One afternoon, Clara was working in the large conference room when she overheard a conversation that made her pause. A group of executives sat at the table, discussing an important meeting coming up. They were talking about how difficult it was to keep the company's image polished and professional. One of them, a middle-aged woman named Elizabeth, laughed and said, "Well, at least we don't have to worry about appearances in the janitorial department. They're invisible anyway." The others chuckled, as if the comment was just a casual joke. But Clara couldn't help but feel the sting of their words. She stood silently by the door, her cleaning supplies in hand, unsure if she should leave the room. But then she remembered, this wasn't her battle. They didn't understand the work she did. They didn't see how much effort went into keeping their office looking spotless, or how important it was to make sure that everything was in its place. Her job might not have had a fancy title, but it was still meaningful. After all, it wasn't just about the cleaning. Clara had learned the ins and outs of the building. She knew the patterns of the workers when they took breaks, when the executives were in meetings, and when the office would be quiet enough for her to do her work. She could read the room better than most people, even if they didn't realize it. The mockery didn't stop. In fact, it seemed to grow stronger as time went on. The employees became more comfortable with their jokes, more open with their disdain. But Clara remained quiet, always going about her tasks with the same professionalism. After all, she had learned long ago that actions spoke louder than words, and one day, her silence would speak volumes. The atmosphere at McCall Industries was shifting, though no one seemed to notice at first. The office, once bustling with the hum of confident executives and the click-clack of keyboards, had grown quieter in recent weeks. The usual chatter in the hallways had been replaced with whispers, hushed conversations behind closed doors. Even the employees who used to joke about Clara's presence now seemed distracted, as if something was hanging over them. It all started one afternoon when an email was sent out to everyone in the company. It was short and to the point. A special inspection will be held next week. Please be prepared for an evaluation of the company's operations. Further details to follow. No one knew who had organized this sudden inspection or why it was happening. It was rare for McCall Industries to announce such a thing without giving employees a chance to prepare. The executives began to hold secret meetings. Clara noticed the change in their behavior. They no longer walked down the halls with their usual confident strides. Now they moved quickly, looking over their shoulders as though something was watching them. Even the cleaning staff could feel the tension. Clara heard the whispers in the elevator, the hushed voices as workers gathered in groups by the coffee machine. I heard it someone from outside the company, one employee said, his voice low. Someone who's going to review everything, management, finances, even how the place is run. Another worker, a woman named Martha, whispered back, it's all very strange. I don't know who would want to inspect us. Everything seems fine, right? But Clara wasn't so sure. She could feel it in the air, a sense of unease. There was something more to this than anyone realized. As the days passed, the building became more tense. The executives grew even more closed off, meeting behind closed doors, their conversations cutting off whenever someone entered the room. The staff, who were usually preoccupied with their tasks, seemed to grow more aware of their surroundings, as though they too sensed that something was about to happen. One day, as Clara was cleaning the break room, she overheard a conversation between two senior executives, Mark and Tom. They were standing by the window, looking out over the city, their voices barely above a whisper. Do you think they'll find out? Mark asked, his face tense. I don't know, Tom replied, shaking his head. If they do, we're all in trouble. Clara felt a knot form in her stomach. The words sounded important, but she didn't know exactly what they were talking about. All she knew was that the air felt thicker now, as though something was about to unfold. She had seen the cracks in the company for months, the way people treated each other like competition instead of colleagues. But whatever was coming, this inspection seemed different. The tension continued to build, and even the cleaning staff began to sense it. People were talking less in the halls, moving more cautiously, almost as if they were afraid to make a wrong move. Clara could feel the change, but she kept her thoughts to herself. She had learned that it was better to watch and wait. After all, she had her own ways of seeing what others couldn't. And when the time came, she would be ready. The day of the mysterious inspection finally arrived. The usual bustle of the office seemed quieter than usual, as if everyone was holding their breath. Clara noticed it most in the hallways, where the usual conversations had stopped. The employees seemed tense, walking briskly, their eyes glued to their phones or papers. They moved past her quickly, not even bothering to acknowledge her presence. For once, Clara felt like she was invisible in a different way, not ignored, but rather unnoticed in the wave of uncertainty that swept through the building. In the afternoon, an email came through announcing that an emergency meeting would be held in the boardroom and all executives were required to attend. The word emergency made the air feel even heavier. The tension seemed to thicken as the minutes passed. Clara had seen this before in other workplaces. When something important was about to happen, People started acting out of character, nervous and jittery. The moment the boardroom door closed behind the last executive, a wave of silence seemed to fall over the office. It was as if everyone was waiting for something to happen. Clara, as usual, was working silently nearby, but her mind couldn't help but wander. She knew that something was different, something was brewing. As she was cleaning one of the nearby offices, Clara overheard a voice coming from the crack in the door of the boardroom. It was Mr. Dawson, the CEO. His voice was louder than usual, and there was an edge to it. "This is ridiculous," he said sharply. "I'm the CEO of this company. I don't answer to anyone." Clara paused, feeling a sense of curiosity. Mr. Dawson had always carried himself with an air of superiority. He was a man who expected respect, even fear, from everyone around him. Hearing him speak with such frustration was unusual. She wondered what could possibly be happening inside that room to make him so upset. The voices inside the room grew louder, but Clara couldn't catch all the words. She continued her work, carefully listening for any clues that might explain the growing tension. She knew better than to get too involved. After all, she was just the cleaning lady. But as the minutes passed, she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening in the boardroom was more important than anyone realized. Finally, the door opened, and the executives began to leave the room one by one. Their faces were pale, and their usual confident strides were replaced with hurried steps. Clara caught a glimpse of Mark, one of the senior executives. His face was flushed, his eyes darting around nervously. He caught her gaze for a split second before quickly turning away, almost as if he had been caught in something he wasn't supposed to be doing. It didn't take long for whispers to start circulating through the office. No one knew exactly what had happened in the meeting, but it was clear that things had changed. People were talking in low voices, looking over their shoulders as they passed each other. The usual air of confidence that filled the building was now replaced with an undercurrent of fear. As Clara cleaned the floors, she couldn't help but wonder what had been discussed in that room. The building, once full of confident, important people, now felt like a place on edge. And she, the quiet cleaning lady, could feel it more than anyone else. The next morning, the atmosphere in the building felt even more tense than the day before. The whispers from the day before hadn't died down, and employees moved about the office with a nervous energy. Clara, as usual, arrived early and began her work. She had learned long ago not to pay much attention to the office gossip. Her job was to clean and keep things in order, and that's what she did best. But today, she noticed something different in the way people were walking. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, as if everyone was waiting for something. As Clara worked, she heard the soft click of heels on the floor, growing louder as someone approached. She turned to see Elizabeth, one of the senior executives, walking towards her. Elizabeth's expression was different today. She was no longer the confident woman who always seemed in control. Today, she seemed uneasy, as though she had something on her mind. She stopped in front of Clara, her eyes briefly meeting hers. "Good morning, Clara," Elizabeth said, though her voice lacked the usual cheerfulness. It was almost as if she were unsure of how to speak to her. Clara nodded, offering a polite smile. "Good morning, Miss Harrison." There was a brief pause before Elizabeth spoke again, glancing around the hallway to make sure no one was watching. "Have you heard the news?" she asked in a quiet voice. Clara raised an eyebrow. "What news?" "Well, you know the inspection yesterday," Elizabeth continued, her voice even quieter now. "It seems there's been a few changes, big changes." Clara didn't respond. She had already guessed as much. The employees were uneasy, and the executives were behaving differently. Whatever had happened in the boardroom the day before had shaken them, and Clara had a feeling that the ripples were going to reach further than they realized. Before Elizabeth could say anything else, the door to the boardroom swung open. Out stepped Mr. Dawson, the CEO. He walked down the hallway with a tense expression, his eyes narrowed. He didn't look at Clara as he passed by, but he did glance at Elizabeth. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and then he was gone. Clara noticed that the executives who had been in the meeting yesterday were now gathering in the boardroom again. They were all standing outside the door, speaking in low voices. Clara, of course, couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see their body language, the way they moved quickly, almost as if they were trying to avoid being seen. It was then that she saw a small group of people who seemed out of place. They were standing off to the side of the hallway, all of them in simple, unassuming clothes. They didn't look like they belonged in a company like McCall Industries. Clara took a closer look and realized that these people weren't employees at all. They were the ones behind the inspection. They were the ones who had come to make the changes. Clara's heart began to race. She knew who they were, and she knew what this meant. With calm steps, Clara made her way to the boardroom, her cleaning cart and towel. When she reached the door, she took a deep breath. The people inside had no idea who she really was, and today they would find out. She opened the door and walked in, her presence immediately felt. The room was still as Clara's words hung in the air. Everyone stared at her, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and confusion. It wasn't just the surprise of hearing her speak. Clara had never been anything more than the cleaning lady to them. But now, here she was, standing confidently in the boardroom, as though she had always belonged there. Mr. Dawson was the first to recover from the shock. He cleared his throat, his face flushing with embarrassment. "Excuse me," he said, his voice a little shakier than usual. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Clara, you're not supposed to be here. We're having a very important meeting." Clara gave him a calm, unwavering look. "Oh, I know, but this meeting concerns me. I've been involved in the company's operations for much longer than you realize." The executives exchanged confused glances, unsure of how to react. Clara could see the doubt in their eyes. They were all trying to make sense of the situation, but the truth was, they had no idea who she really was. To them, she was just another member of the cleaning staff, someone they could easily overlook. But Clara wasn't just the cleaning lady. She had spent years quietly watching, listening, and learning about the inner workings of McCall Industries. While they ignored her, she had gathered information that none of them had ever bothered to notice. She knew the company's secrets, its weaknesses, and its potential. And now she was going to use that knowledge to take control. "I am here to inform you that changes are coming," Clara continued, her voice steady. "I represent the majority shareholders in this company, and it's time for a new direction. The way things have been run here is outdated, and it's holding everyone back." The room went silent again, but this time there was an uncomfortable edge to it. The executives shifted in their seats, clearly uneasy. Clara could feel the weight of their eyes on her, but she didn't let it faze her. She was in control now. "Starting today," Clara went on, "I'll be overseeing the restructuring of this company. The leadership team will be reevaluated, and we'll make some tough decisions. There will be no more room for inefficiency or arrogance. It's time to make McCall Industries a company that truly thrives, not just a place where egos are inflated." Mr. Dawson stood up abruptly, his face turning red. "You can't do this," he shouted. "This is my company. I built it from the ground up." Clara calmly met his gaze. "You may have built it, Mr. Dawson, but it's clear that the next few days at McCall Industries were nothing short of chaotic." Clara had made her announcement in the boardroom, and though the executives had no choice but to accept her authority, the air in the office was thick with tension. It was clear that no one knew how to respond to the sudden shift in power. The once mighty leadership team now had to answer to someone they had underestimated for years. As Clara walked through the halls, she could feel the eyes of the employees on her. Some were curious, others unsure, but most seemed impressed by her boldness. The cleaning lady had become a figure of mystery, no longer just the person who swept the floors and cleaned the windows. She had taken control, and now everyone was waiting to see what she would do next. In the boardroom, things were far from settled. The former executives were still reeling from Clara's unexpected takeover. Mr. Dawson, once the powerful CEO of the company, now sat quietly in his seat, his pride wounded. He no longer spoke with the same authority. Instead, he watched as Clara held meetings with the new leadership team she had brought in, all of them young and eager to turn the company around. Clara, however, remained calm. She wasn't here to prove anything to anyone. She didn't need to flaunt her power. She simply knew what needed to be done. She made decisions with quiet confidence, ensuring that each step was measured and thoughtful. The company had been stagnant for too long, and it was time to bring fresh ideas to the table. The first major change came when Clara announced a new project that would redefine the company's approach. McCall Industries had always been stuck in its old ways, outdated methods, slow processes, and a lack of innovation. Clara's new team was tasked with rethinking everything, from the products they made to the way they interacted with customers. She wanted McCall Industries to become a leader in its field once again, but that would require radical change. At first, the employees were hesitant. Change was never easy, and many of them had grown comfortable in the familiar routine. But Clara was determined to move forward. She spent hours meeting with different departments, listening to employees at all levels of the company. She asked questions, took notes, and worked closely with her new team to develop a clear vision for the future. Over time, the atmosphere began to shift. Employees who had once felt powerless began to see a new possibility. Clara's approach was different from the old leadership. She treated everyone with respect, valuing their input and making them feel part of the decision-making process. The energy in the office started to change. There was a new sense of purpose, a renewed drive to succeed. Mr. Dawson, however, remained on the sidelines. He still carried the weight of his old position, but it was clear that his time in charge had passed. Clara was now the one who set the direction for McCall Industries, and though the transition was difficult, she was proving that sometimes the most unexpected people can bring about the greatest changes. As the days went on, Clara continued to lead with a steady hand. The company slowly but surely began to show signs of improvement. The staff became more engaged, the processes more efficient, and the morale lifted. Clara's quiet strength had turned McCall Industries around, and the once dismissed cleaning lady had become the heart of the company's transformation. Months passed, and McCall Industries had undergone a transformation that no one could have predicted. The company, once on the brink of failure, was now thriving, thanks to Clara's steady leadership. Her calm approach had brought stability and innovation to a place that had felt stagnant for far too long. The staff, once wary of change, now embraced it. They had seen what a difference new leadership could make, and they were all invested in the company's future. The changes didn't come easily, and there were challenges along the way. Not everyone was happy with the new direction. Some old employees struggled to adapt, while others found it difficult to let go of the past. But Clara never lost sight of her goal. She knew that if the company was to succeed, it would have to change from the inside out. She worked tirelessly, always listening to her team and making adjustments as needed. In one of the company's weekly meetings, Clara addressed the staff, her calm voice echoing through the room. "We've come a long way," she said, looking at the faces of the employees who had been there through it all. "But this is just the beginning. We've made great progress, but there's still work to be done. Together, we will continue to grow." The employees nodded, their faces full of hope. They had seen the shift in the company, and they knew that they were part of something bigger than themselves. Clara had given them the opportunity to thrive, and they were ready to take on whatever came next. Meanwhile, Mr. Dawson had quietly stepped aside. He no longer held any power in the company, and it was clear that he had no desire to fight the changes that had come. He had been given the option to stay on as a consultant, but he declined, choosing instead to leave the company he had once ruled over. His departure marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new one. Clara never celebrated his exit. She knew that the success of McCall Industries wasn't about personal victories. It was about the people who worked there, the ones who believed in the company's future. Her focus had always been on the team, not the spotlight. As time went on, McCall Industries became a leader in its field. The company's profits grew, and its reputation improved. The brand was revitalized, and customers began to take notice. Clara's decision to focus on innovation and employee engagement had paid off, and the company was now recognized as a forward-thinking, modern organization. In the quiet moments, as Clara walked the halls of the company, she sometimes paused to reflect on how far things had come. She had once been the cleaning lady, overlooked and underestimated, but now she was the one making the decisions, shaping the future of McCall Industries. She smiled to herself, knowing that the journey wasn't over. There would always be challenges, new goals to reach, and more changes to be made. But with her team by her side, Clara knew that McCall Industries would continue to rise. The company had been given a new chance, and Clara had proven that sometimes the most unexpected people could change the world.